Welcome to machines built for a future that never arrived. Too bold, too different, too early. These tractors changed farming forever, then disappeared. Not because they failed, but because the world couldn't follow. This isn't history, it's lost revolution. Number 1. Steiger Cougar ST-225. By the mid-1970s, American farming was undergoing a transformation. Large operators were managing thousands of acres. Implements were growing wider every season. Traditional two-wheel drive tractors were no longer enough. The industry needed machines built purely for traction and brute force. The Steiger Cougar ST-225, introduced in 1977, was one of the clearest answers to that demand. This was a purpose-built articulated four-wheel drive tractor. It did not evolve from a row crop design. It was conceived from the ground up to pull massive implements across open land. The ST-225 used an articulated frame, allowing the entire tractor to bend at the center for steering. All four wheels drove constantly. Weight was distributed evenly. Traction was relentless. Power came from a Cummins diesel producing over 225 horsepower, staggering for its time. More importantly, that power could actually be used. Unlike rear-wheel drive tractors that lost traction under load, the Steiger could convert nearly all its power into forward motion. Farmers who moved from conventional tractors to a Cougar could suddenly pull wider plows, deeper rippers, and enormous seed drills in a single pass. This changed field economics. One tractor could replace 2 or 3 smaller machines. One operator could work hundreds of acres in a day. The ST-225 helped make big farming practical rather than theoretical. Steiger built these machines in Fargo, North Dakota, using a modular, rugged philosophy. Components were heavy, wiring was simple. The cab was basic but functional. These tractors were meant to be fixed in the field, not in a laboratory. The impact spread fast. Competitors rushed to build their own articulated 4WD tractors. By the end of the 1970s, high-horsepower four-wheel drive machines were no longer exotic. They were essential in large-scale agriculture. But Steiger itself did not survive as an independent force. During the 1980s farm crisis, falling commodity prices and rising debt crushed equipment manufacturers. Steiger changed ownership multiple times and was eventually absorbed into larger corporate structures. The original Steiger-built Cougar line ended. The green articulated giants that redefined traction disappeared as independent machines. Their DNA lived on inside Case and later Case IH. But the original ST-225, the tractor that taught farmers what real pulling power meant, became a relic of a vanished company. Number 2. International Harvester 1586. In 1976, International Harvester launched what it believed would secure its dominance in row crop agriculture, the 86 series tractors. At the top of that lineup stood the IH 1586. This was a 160 horsepower rear-wheel drive tractor designed for serious field work. It featured turbocharged diesel power, massive rear axles, and International Harvester's new control center cab, a factory-installed sealed environment with heating, ventilation, and optional air conditioning. For many farmers, this was their first experience working all day without dust, heat, or exhaustion. The 1586 changed daily farming life. Long tillage days became physically possible. Spring planting could continue in heat. Fall harvesting extended into colder nights. Productivity was no longer limited by human endurance. Mechanically, the 1586 was built for heavy drawbar work. It pulled large plows, discs, and cultivators across North America. Its torque characteristics made it ideal for deep tillage. On mixed farms, it became the central power unit, running forage harvesters, grain carts, and large PTO-driven equipment. In thousands of operations, the 1586 replaced multiple older tractors. It was not just more powerful, it consolidated labor. But this machine also carried the weight of its company's fate. International Harvester entered the late 1970s already strained. A prolonged labor strike in 1979 halted production. The farm economy collapsed in the early 1980s. Debt soared. By 1984, International Harvester sold its agricultural division. When that happened, the IH tractor line effectively ended. Case purchased the assets and formed Case IH. The red paint remained, but the identity changed. The 1586 and its siblings ceased production. No direct successor carried its engineering lineage unchanged. The name International Harvester vanished from tractor hoods. For the farmers who owned them, the 1586 became something rare, a machine built by a company that no longer existed. It had modernized the row crop tractor. It had normalized the enclosed cab. It had redefined what a main tractor looked like on North American farms. And then its maker disappeared. Number 3. Allis-Chalmers 7050. By the late 1970s, horsepower had become a weapon. Every major manufacturer was racing toward bigger numbers, heavier frames, and stronger drivetrains. Allis-Chalmers, once one of America's most respected machinery builders, knew it had to evolve or disappear. Its answer was the Allis-Chalmers 7050. Introduced in 1977, the 7050 was a 160 horsepower class tractor designed to compete directly with giants like the IH 1586 and John Deere's 40 series. It was powered by a turbocharged 4026 cubic inch diesel engine that delivered strong torque and efficient fuel use for its size. Unlike many older Allis machines, the 7050 was built for sustained heavy drawbar work rather than light mixed farm duty. What made the 7050 significant was that it marked Allis-Chalmers' full commitment to the modern high-horsepower era. It featured a factory-installed cab with real sound insulation, heating, and air conditioning. Controls were repositioned for longer working days. Hydraulics were upgraded to handle wider implements and heavier mounted equipment. On real farms, the 7050 became the backbone machine. It pulled 6- and 7-bottom plows, heavy discs, and large field cultivators. It ran forage harvesters and big grain augers. For many Allis-loyal farmers, it was the first tractor that allowed them to farm like the big operators. Fewer passes, wider tools, more acres per day. But Allis-Chalmers was already in trouble. The company entered the 1980s carrying enormous debt. The farm crisis crushed equipment sales. Competitors with deeper pockets survived. Allis did not. In 1985, Allis-Chalmers exited tractor manufacturing. Its agricultural division was sold, and the orange tractors disappeared from new production. The 7050 and its siblings became orphans overnight. There was no next-generation Allis tractor, no evolutionary successor, no continuity. Farmers who had built their operations around orange machines suddenly owned equipment from a dead manufacturer. The 7050 had helped push Allis-Chalmers into the modern horsepower race. It proved the company could still build a serious field tractor, but it arrived too late. It changed how Allis farmers worked, and then became the last of its kind. Number 4. Massey Ferguson 1800. Long before most farmers accepted articulated tractors, Massey Ferguson made a bold and risky move. In 1971, it introduced the Massey Ferguson 1800, a massive, articulated four-wheel drive tractor powered by a Caterpillar V8 engine. This was not an experiment. It was a full production machine sold internationally. At a time when most tractors still relied on two-driven wheels, the MF 1800 offered true all-wheel traction. Its articulated frame allowed the tractor to bend in the middle, steering by pivoting rather than turning front wheels. This gave it both enormous pulling power and surprisingly tight turning ability for its size. The MF 1800 produced well over 200 horsepower, an extraordinary figure in the early 1970s. It was built for open-field agriculture, deep plowing, heavy ripping, and massive cultivation. On large wheat and grain farms, especially in Europe and parts of North America, it allowed farmers to move to implements previously considered impractical. One MF 1800 could replace multiple conventional tractors. It changed the scale of operations. It shortened working windows. It reduced labor requirements, but it also exposed a problem. Massey Ferguson was a global company built around mass-market tractors. The 1800 was expensive, specialized, and built in small numbers. Support networks were not ready. Many dealers were unfamiliar with articulated machines. Farmers were cautious. The model was produced only for a few years before being replaced by different approaches to high horsepower. Massey never truly committed to dominating the articulated 4WD segment in the way Steiger or Versatile did. The MF 1800 vanished quietly. It left behind something important: proof that articulated tractors could be sold by mainstream manufacturers. It showed that ultra-high horsepower did not have to come from niche builders, but the tractor itself became rare. No direct descendant followed its design philosophy. Later Massey high-horsepower machines took different forms. The 1800 changed perceptions. It proved the future existed. Then it disappeared. Number 5. Versatile 850. When farmers in the 1970s talked about real power, they were often talking about Versatile. The Canadian manufacturer had already earned a reputation for building some of the toughest articulated tractors in the world, and in 1976 it introduced one of its most influential machines, the Versatile 850. This was not a refined tractor. It was a weapon. The 850 delivered around 280 horsepower from a Cummins diesel and used a simple, brutally strong articulated frame. There were no electronic systems, no luxury features. The cab was functional, not elegant. Everything about the machine was designed around one goal: convert fuel into pulling force. On the vast plains of Canada and the American Midwest, the 850 changed how farms operated. It pulled implements that had once required two tractors working in tandem. Deep ripping, wide cultivation, and massive air seeders became routine. One operator could now prepare and seed hundreds of acres per day. Versatile's philosophy was different from most manufacturers. Where others focused on refinement and branding, Versatile focused on durability and cost. Farmers could buy extreme horsepower without paying luxury prices. This made large-scale mechanization accessible to operations that could never afford premium European or American giants. The result was a quiet revolution. Farms that once relied on fleets of smaller tractors consolidated around a single high-horsepower machine. Labor needs dropped, timelines compressed, weather windows became less frightening, but Versatile did not remain the same company. Through the 1980s and 1990s, ownership changed multiple times. The brand survived, but the original Versatile model lines did not. The 850 disappeared. Its design philosophy was absorbed, altered, and rebadged under different corporate structures. The tractor that had made extreme horsepower affordable became a museum piece. Its influence lived on. But the 850 itself, the raw mechanical giant that helped democratize big farm power, vanished from production forever. Number 6. Fiat 18090. In Europe, farming faced a different challenge. Fields were smaller, roads were narrower, yet horsepower demand was rising fast. European farmers needed big tractors that could still operate in tight landscapes. Fiat's answer was the Fiat 18090. Released in 1984, the 18090 delivered around 180 horsepower in a surprisingly compact form. It featured a turbocharged 6-cylinder engine and one of the most advanced factory cabs of its era. Styled by Pininfarina, the cab was not just beautiful, it was practical, quiet, and ergonomic. Visibility was excellent, controls were logically arranged, long working days became normal. This tractor changed expectations across Europe. Before the 18090, high horsepower often meant crude, uncomfortable machines or imported giants unsuited to European farms. Fiat proved that a large tractor could still be refined, roadable, and adaptable. The 18090 became a benchmark for how powerful tractors should feel. On large European arable farms, it pulled wide plows, heavy cultivators, and large trailers. On mixed operations, it became the central machine, powerful enough for primary tillage, yet civilized enough for daily transport and PTO work. The 18090 helped modernize European agriculture in the same way Steiger and Versatile did in North America, by making scale practical. But Fiat's tractor identity did not survive unchanged. In the 1990s, Fiat consolidated its agricultural brands. Fiat Agri merged into New Holland. Model names changed. Product lines were rebuilt under global platforms. The Fiat blue and orange tractors disappeared from showrooms. The 180/90 had no direct successor carrying its name or identity. It became a symbol of a vanished era, when Fiat still built tractors under its own banner and when Europe first embraced true high-horsepower farming. Number 7. Ford 8600. In the 1970s, Ford tractors were everywhere. From small dairy farms to large grain operations, the blue machines were trusted for their simplicity and reliability. But Ford had long been seen as a mid-range manufacturer, strong in utility tractors, less dominant in the heavy horsepower class. That changed with the Ford 8600, introduced in 1975. The 8600 was one of the most powerful tractors Ford had ever built. With roughly 135 to 140 horsepower from a turbocharged 6-cylinder diesel, it was designed to compete directly with international harvester John Deere and Allis-Chalmers in serious fieldwork. This tractor transformed what a Ford farm looked like. The 8600 could pull large plows, heavy discs, and wide cultivators that had previously required larger brand machines. It brought Ford owners into the era of high-capacity farming without forcing them to abandon the brand they trusted. On many operations, the 8600 replaced two older tractors and became the single main power unit. Its cab was modern for the time, sealed, heated, and far quieter than open-station machines. Farmers who had spent decades exposed to dust and heat suddenly worked in comfort. Long days became normal. Seasonal bottlenecks eased. The 8600 proved that Ford could build a true big tractor. It altered the competitive balance in many regions where Ford dealers had strong loyalty. But the machine also represented the end of something. In 1991, Ford sold its tractor division to Fiat. The Ford name gradually disappeared from tractor hoods, replaced by Ford New Holland and eventually New Holland alone. The blue color remained, but the identity changed. The 8600 had no true Ford-branded descendant. It became one of the last heavy tractors to wear the Ford badge, a machine that carried the company into the high-horsepower era, only for that identity to vanish shortly afterward. Number 8. Zetor Crystal 8011. In Eastern Europe, farming in the 1970s faced unique conditions. Equipment had to be rugged, simple, and capable of surviving with limited parts supply. Zetor, based in Czechoslovakia, had built its reputation on durable, straightforward tractors. But until the mid-1970s, it lacked true high-horsepower machines. That changed with the Zetor Crystal 8011. Introduced in 1975, the 8011 was Zetor's first 6-cylinder production tractor. It delivered around 80 horsepower, a major leap for the company, and introduced a new class of machine to Eastern European agriculture. It featured an integrated safety cab, improved hydraulics, and a more powerful drivetrain than any Zetor before it. For many farms, especially collective and state operations, the Crystal series represented real modernization. Larger implements became possible. Field operations sped up. Tasks that once required multiple passes could be completed in fewer runs. The 8011 was not luxurious. It was loud, mechanical, and built for survival. But it brought scale and efficiency to regions where farming had long been constrained by underpowered machinery. This tractor helped push Eastern European agriculture into a new era. Then the world changed. Political and economic systems collapsed in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Zetor restructured. Product lines were modernized. The Crystal series was discontinued and replaced by new families built for a global market. The 8011 vanished. It remains a symbol of transition, the machine that carried an entire region from modest mechanization into true modern farming, before disappearing in the economic upheaval that followed. Number 9. Renault 145/14. In France and much of Western Europe, Renault tractors were once as common as Ford or Fiat. By the late 1970s, European farms were growing in size, implements were becoming heavier, and farmers demanded machines that could handle deep plowing and wide cultivation without relying on imported American giants. Renault answered with the Renault 145/14. Launched in 1980, the 145/14 was the most powerful production tractor Renault had ever built. With roughly 145 horsepower from a turbocharged 6-cylinder engine, it was designed for serious primary tillage. This was not a utility tractor scaled up. It was built from the start as a heavy field machine. The 14514 changed how large European farms operated. It could pull wide reversible plows, heavy cultivators, and large trailers that previously required either multiple smaller tractors or imported 4WD machines. For French grain farms in particular, it became the backbone tractor, the machine that prepared land, hauled harvests, and powered large PTO equipment. Renault also invested in operator comfort. The cab was fully enclosed, heated, and quieter than earlier generations. Visibility improved. Controls became more ergonomic. Long field days became manageable, even in harsh conditions. What made the 14514 important was that it proved Europe did not need to depend on American-style giants for heavy work. It showed that a European manufacturer could build a high-horsepower tractor suited to regional farms, roads, and field layouts. But Renault's tractor business did not survive intact. During the 1980s and 1990s, Renault Agriculture underwent restructuring and was eventually sold. The Renault name disappeared from tractor production, absorbed into what later became Claas. The old Renault model families ended. The 14514 had no direct successor carrying its identity. It became one of the last true Renault giants, a tractor that modernized French farming and then vanished with the brand that built it. Number 10. White 4210. In North America, White was a powerful but fragile name, formed from the remnants of Oliver, Cockshut, and Minneapolis Molen. White attempted to unite multiple legacies into a single modern brand. One of its boldest machines was the White 4210. Introduced in 1975, the 4210 was an articulated four-wheel drive tractor producing over 210 horsepower. It was designed to compete directly with Steiger and Versatile in the big field market. Powered by a turbocharged Cummins diesel, the 4210 delivered massive drawbar power and exceptional traction. This tractor changed what White dealers could offer. For the first time, farmers loyal to Oliver or Minneapolis Molen heritage could buy a true big acreage machine without switching brands. The 4210 pulled enormous plows, deep rippers, and wide cultivators. It allowed farms to move into large-scale tillage with a single operator. The articulated design gave it agility despite its size. The cab, though simple, protected operators from dust, wind, and heat. For many farmers, it became the first tractor that made truly industrial-scale farming possible. But White Motor Corporation was already unstable. Financial pressure mounted throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s. The farm crisis crushed demand. White's agricultural division was sold, the brand fragmented. Tractor production under the White name faded. The 4210 vanished with it. There was no next generation, no evolution, no continuation of the White articulated line. For those who owned them, the 4210 became a powerful reminder. A machine that transformed their operation, built by a company that no longer existed. These tractors didn't vanish because they were wrong. They vanished because they were ahead. Their ideas lived on even when their names didn't. Progress remembers results, not the pioneers who paid the price.